It started the day my dad came home from the hospital. I had been planning something for weeks, unsure if I would ever go through with it. But that day, everything seemed to fall into place. I took a deep breath, poured his usual cup of tea, and slipped the drug into it, stirring until it dissolved completely. I handed him the tea, trying to appear casual. He took it from me with a grateful smile, unaware that today was different. I watched as he drank it all, no suspicion in his eyes. Once he finished, I knew we had about 4 hours before the drug took full effect. It was supposed to knock him out completely. We left the house soon after, knowing the waiting game had begun. I had taken a few precautions. I had installed hidden cameras around my dad's house weeks earlier, connecting them to my phone so I could see everything that happened there, even when I wasn't around. It was a small but crucial detail that gave me some peace of mind. I needed to know what Lauren, his young new wife, was really up to. After 5 hours passed, I checked my phone to review the live footage. My dad was lying on the couch, completely unconscious, just as planned. But what happened next left me stunned. Lauren walked into the room, her expression calm, too calm. Instead of rushing to his side or checking if he was okay, she casually strolled over to him and slapped him across the face. My heart raced. She was testing to see if he'd wake up. But when he didn't move, her reaction was nothing like what I had expected. Instead of panicking, she broke into a grin. Her eyes lit up with excitement as she pulled out her phone and made a video call. I watched in disbelief as she spoke to someone on the other end. A man. "The old fool is dead, baby," she said, laughing. "We're rich." She thought my dad had died. She thought all of his wealth was about to become hers. Lauren had been in our lives for less than a year, but it felt like she had wormed her way in overnight. My dad was 75 years old, and she was only 27, a fact that none of my siblings or I could overlook. When he first introduced her as his girlfriend, we were floored. My first instinct was that she had to be after his money. What else could explain it? My dad, a successful businessman who had built his fortune with my late mother, seemed completely enchanted by her. He truly believed she cared for him, and despite our repeated warnings, he refused to listen. He was happy, he said. That should have been enough for us. But it wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren was playing a long game. And now, seeing her celebrate my dad's supposed death, I knew I had been right all along. The question was, what was I going to do about it? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was my sister calling to check in. I hesitated before answering, my mind racing. Should I tell her what I had just witnessed? I wasn't sure if any of them were ready to hear it. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, her voice cheerful. I paused, glancing at the footage again. Lauren was still talking on the phone, now laughing about all the things she was going to buy once she got her hands on my dad's money. I clenched my fist, feeling a surge of anger. "Yeah," I lied, forcing calm into my voice. "Everything's fine." I ended the call quickly, knowing I couldn't keep this secret for long, but I needed time to think. I couldn't rush this. Lauren had played her cards perfectly so far, deceiving everyone, including my dad. If I was going to confront her, I needed to make sure I had all the evidence to back it up. Hours passed, and I kept watching the footage. Lauren's attitude was chilling. She showed no signs of remorse, no hint of worry. To her, my dad was already gone, and she was already spending his money in her head. I had never seen anyone so cold, so calculating. When my dad first introduced Lauren to our family, I knew something was off. The way she smiled, the way she spoke, it all felt rehearsed, like she had spent hours preparing to charm us. But what really unnerved me was how quickly my dad fell for her. Within a month, they were inseparable. He spoke about her constantly, telling us how happy she made him. But we weren't convinced. How could we be? The age gap was one thing, but the speed of their relationship was another. Lauren had moved into his home after just 2 months of dating. She seemed to know exactly what to say to win his trust. Every time we voiced concerns, she'd offer some smooth explanation that made everything seem reasonable. "We're just in love," she'd say, flashing that disarming smile. "Age is just a number." But I couldn't ignore the facts. My dad had built a fortune, and Lauren seemed very interested in it. Whenever the topic of his business or investments came up, her eyes would light up in a way that made me uneasy. My siblings noticed it too, but every time we tried to bring it up with my dad, he'd shut us down. He was happy, he kept telling us. That should be enough. After their wedding, things only got worse. Lauren became more involved in my dad's financial affairs, offering to help with his paperwork and insisting that he take more time to rest. It seemed harmless enough, but it felt like she was slowly taking control of everything. And now, watching her on the live footage, I realized how deeply she had manipulated him. She had convinced him to change his will, leaving everything to her. And now, she was celebrating his supposed death without a shred of guilt. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to act before she could take this any further. I grabbed my phone and called my siblings. This time, there was no holding back. "We need to meet," I said, my voice tense. "There's something you all need to see." When we gathered later that night, I showed them the footage. The disbelief on their faces mirrored my own initial reaction. My sister, always the calm one, was the first to speak. "How could she?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "She never cared about him," I said bitterly. "It was all about the money." We all knew what had to be done. Lauren had gone too far, and we weren't going to let her get away with it. The next morning, we contacted the police and provided them with the footage. We also spoke to my dad's lawyer, who confirmed what we had suspected all along. Lauren had been pressuring my dad to change his will for months. With the evidence in hand, the police arrested Lauren later that day. She didn't go quietly, of course. She screamed and protested, insisting that she had done nothing wrong. But the truth was clear to everyone now. She had been using my dad from the start, and her plan had finally come crashing down. When my dad woke up the following day, groggy from the drug but otherwise fine, we told him everything. At first, he refused to believe it. He had loved Lauren, or at least he thought he had. But when we showed him the footage, the look of betrayal on his face broke my heart. "I thought she cared about me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We all wanted to believe that," I said gently. "But she was only after your money, Dad. She didn't care about you at all." In the days that followed, the full extent of Lauren's scheme became clear. She had been working with her boyfriend, a man none of us had even known existed, to scam my dad out of his fortune. The plan had been to marry him, change the will, and then wait for him to die, or so she thought. It was a bitter pill for my dad to swallow. He had been so sure that Lauren was different, that she truly loved him. But now he saw the truth. And though it was painful, I think it also gave him a sense of relief. He was free from her manipulation, and he still had us, his family, by his side. Lauren and her boyfriend were both sentenced to prison for fraud and conspiracy. The media caught wind of the story, and soon it was all over the news. My dad, once a respected businessman, had become a victim of a gold digger's plot. It was embarrassing for him, but he handled it with grace. He knew that in the end, the truth had come out, and justice had been served. For me, the whole ordeal was a lesson in trust. I had always been close to my dad, but seeing him so vulnerable, so easily manipulated, made me realize how fragile even the strongest people can be. It's easy to get blinded by love or the idea of it, especially when you're lonely. And my dad had been lonely for a long time, ever since my mom passed away. As time went on, my dad began to heal. He threw himself back into his work, focusing on the business he and my mom had built together. He swore he'd never get involved with anyone like Lauren again, and we believed him. We continued to visit him often, making sure he was never alone. And while the scars from his experience with Lauren would never fully fade, I think he found comfort in the fact that his family had always been there for him, even when he couldn't see the danger right in front of him. Looking back, I'm just grateful we acted when we did. If we hadn't, Lauren might have succeeded in her plan, and my dad could have lost everything, including his life. It was a close call, but in the end, we were able to protect him from her greed. And as for Lauren, well, she'll be spending the next few decades behind bars, thinking about the price of her greed.